Welcome to the Great Shrimp Shoal. Today we are covering a little bit of what's going on in the 30-gallon tank containing the mountains, but we'll also finish up a bootleg filter that I've been working on that is super safe for shrimp. Anyway, I hope that you'll enjoy and subscribe. Let's get things started. The shrimp in the mountains are a prime example of what happens when things go right for a group of dwarf shrimp, kept by a relative newcomer to the field of aquariums and also shrimp keeping. That's right, I still consider myself a newbie. This was my second community, and so it benefited from a lot of what I had learned from keeping my first fish tank, which had a fairly disastrous outcome. The number of shrimp babies has been steadily climbing, and they're enjoying their new and healthy food. They're also doing exactly what you'd like to see shrimp doing: grazing. It's a prime example of why most aquarium owners get dwarf shrimp in the first place. They're really good at cleaning up the undesirable elements in a new tank. Mind you, they're not as indiscriminate as a group of snails, who will pretty much eat anything. However, shrimp are great, and they're usually not harmful to other members of most freshwater tanks, so they're top on my list. In fact, there are a number of dwarf shrimp species specifically bred and expected to clean up a home tank while being hard to spot, no matter where they are in the tank. Stardust Neocaridina, Malawi shrimp, and other brown, transparent, and molted varieties of nondescript coloration make up what I think the other category of dwarf shrimp. Their coloration makes it so that they are not the focus of the tank, and other aquarists who have nice colorful fish or special species in their tank prefer not to upstage them with an equally flashy, cleaner shrimp. And that's why they're so popular. So that brings us to why I love the mountains so much, and it's not what you might think. It's plants, plants, plants. You see, the Java moss and rotala that I planted when I hardscaped this tank have managed to grow some nice portions covering the largest rock and spreading to every corner of the tank. In this tank, the rotala has been trimmed and kept in check, so it hasn't grown out of control like it had in the forest. And the shrimp really love it. Long stalks grow towards the surface, and if you've had an aquarium before, you'll know where the algae likes to grow. That's right, it's close to the surface where there's the most access to the light, so you'll often find the shrimp there, plucking the leaves clean so that the plants can survive better. Algae, if left uncontrolled, can quickly choke out a plant's ability to photosynthesize, and a bloom of algae can inhibit a plant's ability to grow new leaves and escape that situation. All of this is a compounding effect that the shrimp help to mitigate. You can find adult shrimp stuck to the underside of leaves or picking through the above-ground roots looking for bits of food. But the plant that gets the most attention and brings in the most benefit is the moss. Baby shrimp use it for protection, and even the bamboo shrimp seem to prefer to molt there for who knows what reason. Even copepods like to take shelter in the moss when they don't have a sponge filter to populate. Overall, moss is the ultimate companion for all freshwater invertebrates. Each week, new strands of moss cover more and more space, turning the hard, craggy surface of the rock into a lush green farmland. The shrimp love to dart in and out of the crevices, and they do a great job of keeping the moss clean of algae or detritus. So that got me thinking, what would I want my next tank to look like? I really mean my next tank, because I have something in the works now that can't possibly take care of every single one of my needs. I would like to get a planted tank started, but one that focuses solely on moss. and that would grow on a grid over top of a mat filter. So there would be a division with one side of the tank completely inaccessible to the shrimp. Now, this idea isn't without its difficulties. First, it makes it hard to make sure that little shrimp babies aren't defeating the design and finding their way behind the mat filter. But in that case, I already managed to keep them out of the hang-on back and canister filters that I have, and those both have large and powerful intakes, so maybe it will be a lot easier than I think. I'm going to start by growing a large mat of moss, about 12 inches across and 10 inches tall. It doesn't need to be perfect though. Then I'll silicone an egg crate grid in place for the mat filter to rest on, dividing the tank in half. Finally, I'll set up a filter on the other side with an output spigot that points to the live side of the moss where the shrimp will live. Hopefully I'll be able to get things started on this soon, because I can't wait to try it out with a shrimp variety that really pops against the green of the moss. I'm also confident that I will be able to do this because I've been fairly successful in my new project of creating a do-it-yourself canister filter with parts that I found at the local hardware store. First, I got 2 3-way NPT threaded PVC junctions. Then I got not 2, not 4, but about 5 or 6 threaded 90-degree PVC joints. Most of this stuff comes from the garden sprinkler section of the hardware store. I also have 2 1/2 inch threaded right angle barbs, 2 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch converters and splicers. I have a bit of 5/8 inch inner diameter tubing, and a few feet of 1/2 inch inner diameter tubing. This stuff I like better because it can still handle a lot of the pressure and is more flexible than the bulky 5/8 inch stuff. I have a selection of stainless steel screw clamps and a garden bubbler for the output. Additionally, I have some extra pieces of 1/2 inch barbs with male threading, a 6 inch length riser, and a standard foam sponge for the intake. I'm going to be using this circulation pump that offers some good flow but can be upgraded on the fly if I need more power. The pump is really cool because it's low wattage, it's interchangeable and has that 1/2 inch threading. It's a right angle for the input and output, so it solves a number of issues right off the bat, while remaining extremely compact. I also have a few extra odds and ends that should help out almost any project, and most importantly, the PTF tape that helps seal the joints. Right now, while I'm getting things set up, is a good point to talk about the NPT threads on most PVC piping. It's really good for doing watertight stuff, as you might expect. The threads incline at 1 degree, so there's a slight slope to a taper at the end. This means that it gets tighter the more that it is twisted. The same cannot be said for straight threading found on bolts and other types of machined threads. This all means that our setup should have an additional layer of protection from leaks, especially when dealing with the low amount of pressure expected in this small filter setup. Add to all of this the PTFE tape, and we should never have to worry about leaks once this is sealed up properly. I'm not going to apply tape for this run, but let me pause real quick to explain this crucial part. By adding the 2 pieces together, we just want to create a nice, stable platform, not share water between all 4 of the pipe outlets. So I've added some paper towel and layered an epoxy over it on both sides of the connecting pipe, being careful not to get any of the epoxy in the threads. Epoxy is not the same for every brand, but this version is set after about half an hour, and I was able to test water on the junction a few hours later. I'm going to get the motor out of the way next because it can get in the way of a lot of the remaining steps if it is applied later. The output is going to get a right angle thread, and that gets attached to one side of the junction. At this point, it doesn't matter which side of the junction because they're all symmetrical. adding a straight joint here to apply a 6-inch riser to. The riser will have holes drilled in it to allow water to pass through into the filter system, through the foam intake sponge. Basically, any design or configuration you could imagine, from slats to a ton of tiny holes, will do. Next, we're going to add on the side opposite to the pump 2 right-angle joints to create a U-bend. To this, we'll attach the output of the filter, which is a small 2-inch riser with the bubbler attached to it. And the bubbler has a small grid filter attached to it to help catch larger particles. This is a really interesting idea. I don't know yet if it will pan out, but it should allow the water returning to the tank to flutter like a small waterfall instead of just pushing out of the tube like a full blast garden hose. Next, we're going to add 2 right-angle joints to the open sides of the junction. This will start to turn around the tubes so that as they come off the tank, they'll be facing upwards so that we can connect to a tabletop canister filter. But they could just as easily point any direction needed to route the tubes leading away from the tank. Next, I'm going to add 2 quick, very short risers to each of the output and input joints. And then on top of that, I'm going to apply the right angle 1/2 inch barb that connects to the 1/2 inch NPT threading. All of the 1/2 inch connectors are useful because they are very common and the accessories as well as the adapters are easy to find and they are cheap. Your local hardware store should have a lot of this stuff because it's the common format for garden sprinkler systems. The epoxy set up really well and created a firm and watertight block between the 2 halves of the junction. So now we have a distinct path out of the filter and back to the return. All it took was a few minutes and about $20 worth of parts. Lastly, I'm going to prep the conversion from the 1/2 inch tube leads that comprise most of the piping to the small 5/8 inch tube ends that allow me to connect it to most types of filters. First, I'll couple the 2 portions of tubes twice over using the joiner, and I'll use some stainless steel screw clamps to tighten the connection and make it watertight. I have some speedy nylon click clamps coming soon that offer a little bit more of a snug fit, and I'll end up using those in the final version of the build. These clamps and the pump are the most expensive part of the build so far. Then all that remains to be done is attach the leads to the pump assembly and getting the filter set up for the tank. This is all pretty easy. After a little trouble filling the pump, I was able to get things started. I was worried that the pump was going to be a bit too powerful, but if anything, it is underpowered, so I'll probably try replacing it with a 2 times more powerful model soon. The setup is pretty spiffy. The $20 canister pre-filter I purchased has been now turned into a 1.5 liter active canister filter with a modular intake and outtake system that fits nicely over the edge of most any tank. While the cost is starting to edge up towards something purpose-made, there is a ton of room to add filter media including carbon, biomedia, and filter pads. The entire purpose of this project was really to get the 1/2 inch NPT connectors involved in the input and output of the filter. This way I can create almost any setup that I can imagine. I could add a spray bar or create a massive intake complete with an equally large sponge for the shrimp to converge on. It really is about creating the best and safest environment for the shrimp and their babies. Anyway, this is the filter I plan on using for this 20-gallon tank, so I'm going to get it started with some fresh tank water to start the cycling process. That is after I get the hardscape and the plants that I want settled in. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick and simple DIY filter setup, and hopefully, if you find it useful, you can put the theories to use on your own tank at home. For now, I'll see you guys next week, and I hope that you have some sweet shrimpy dreams before we meet next. Good night.